Great, thanks a lot, Wes. So it's great to be here. So for context, I'm in charge of technology and operations for EMEA for Discovery. And I'm going to talk specifically about something that we built for Eurosport, and actually broader than Eurosport, something that's an infrastructure that's supporting all of our live production across Europe. And so I'm going to first give you a little bit of background about the project, why we did it, and then share with you some benefits we've seen and some challenges. So hopefully this is useful, and hopefully I think one of the comments you just said is that they're rare to have an end user on here. I think that one thing you're going to see is we're going to recommend that, the more information you can get from people that have done this, I think the more benefit it would have to future users. So Eurosport technology transformation, a huge set of transformation, in fact, 17 different projects under one banner that really aimed at replacing aging infrastructure, that didn't have the ability to change, hard to scale, hard to support, escalating operating costs. So, an old facility, very purpose-built, all SDI based infrastructure, operating across Europe. And what we've done actually, was built an all new infrastructure, an all new 2110 based infrastructure, taking a very different approach to technology, which allows more location flexibility, common access to content, lowers our technology costs for adding new services, and gets us faster to the market for new services and consumer testing. The foundational reason we did it, and the business case lines all fall around three core principles. One is the evolution of live production. So this is about how can we make live production work for everything we do, from simple to very complex. The big one in the middle is digital and linear growth. As I think all of us see, we see a continued erosion of linear audiences and linear dollars for subscriptions and growth in digital. And we've certainly seen that firsthand with what's happened recently in the Tokyo Games. And efficiency and a bottom line. And the interesting thing about this is a very big project with a very big price tag. The ROI is also very quick. The amount of money it can save for the business, it's been saving for the business, is quite substantial, making a very, very compelling business case. So from a technology direction standpoint, what we see is things going from dedicated hardware, physical vision mixers, audio mixers, and things like that, physical editing machines with video cards, moving to virtualization, either on premise or what we call a private cloud. So, and then private cloud, which is kind of the core of what we built, and that is shared systems in common data centers, and then public cloud, and moving to the public cloud. And we see all of it, things we're doing is positioning for the move to the public cloud for even live production. Technology principles are that we want to take a cloud approach to all physical kit. So even if we couldn't put it in the cloud, or even if we couldn't treat it like a virtual machine, things like a vision mixer, a high-end vision mixer, an instant replay box, things like that, we wanted to treat it as if it's a cloud asset. And so we put in a media provisioning layer that allows us to move media services around between locations, even if we want, and this gives us better resiliency and things and scalability, and more efficiency in the use of technology. Common access to all content. So we put all the content in one repository, so we can have immediate access to all content across the business. So central media asset management. IP. I got a big question from somebody at the beginning of the initiative. Are you going IP in 2110 because you think it's cool, or because you really need to? We have as you see here, over 43,000 audio video flows running now, 64 channels of audio. We're dynamically moving things around in terms of how we're deploying the system and orchestrating them. There's no way we could have done this in SDI. There is no way we could have done this in a bundled version of IP either. So having audio and video separate was absolutely essential in this initiative. And then remote production from simple to complex, allowing lots of location flexibility. So we in this project, we have centralized aspects. We have 2 technology hubs. Actually, one is in our own facility and one is in a third-party facility where we've just rented space. I will tell you that has proven to be hugely beneficial, much faster. I mean, we were able to move equipment in on day 1 when we took the lease. We didn't have to build and provision the physical space, move starting equipment in on day 1, and ability to easily scale. It's been really amazingly good here. So certainly a direction we will continue to go in the future. And then we've distributed the operating spaces. So across the business, we have, MCRs, control rooms, edit rooms, high-end post-production, event production, play out, distributed where we want to have it. So we put the users where it makes sense to have them. And then we centralized the tech into what we call these private clouds. So 2 private clouds where all of the 2110 and high-end content exists. A few stats. 2 data centers, 24 different operational sites, over 150, that should say PCRs, production control rooms, sound control rooms, what we call multi-function rooms, which can actually be an edit room, or it can be a replay room, or it can be a TX, digital mix rooms, MCRs, and transition and TXs. 6 studios in the data centers, over 300 racks, over 130 pieces of equipment. There are 800 switches, and it's all a 400 gig network, allowing for all these flows. And I think an interesting stat, during the Tokyo Olympics, we did over 1 million path route changes in the SDN layer. So amazing, really amazing scale, something you really couldn't even contemplate building before now. So what aspect of this works is really good? Well, bottom line, actually, the 2110 BART actually works. And that I think when we went into it, we weren't positive, but the compatibility at the essence layer is actually really good. Okay. And the ability to do things such as flexible formats inside of the same infrastructure. So we have HD and UHD, we have audio running at much smaller individual, because we do all the audio as individual streams. There's no bundling at all. It's all by tagging. So we have managed and unmanaged. So SDN, so that 43,000 actually is the number of managed routes. Things like the intercom or talkback are in an unmanaged bandwidth area, sort of a traditional, you'd say a Wild West IP network, but it's all in the same infrastructure. So we've cordoned off VPNs for the unmanaged, and then we have SDNs for all the managed. So all the high density flows are SDN managed. So different size paths, different size payloads going across the network. We were actually for Tokyo Games running 50 frame and 60 frame all inside the same infrastructure. Virtual packaging of audio and video. This for us is huge. So Eurosport is currently in 22 languages and has a huge mix of rights. Some rights are only available on certain platforms in certain countries. So being able, there's sort of no place where you'd say, I'm going to bundle everything together and this is it. So we create a virtual package of audio and video that goes together for an event, and then we use destination profiles to put it into the right format for a particular device or output. And this has worked out really effective in providing a lot of flexibility to the system. We have flows going across, of course, the networks inside of the data centers, and we're doing wide area connectivity as well with the IP flows. So, overall, really, and this has been pretty stable. This has been pretty good. You'll now see me dive in, though, to a series of challenge slides. And so there's more points on this, because I will say it works, and it's proving to provide this huge scale, but it was far, far from easy. In the project itself, I mean, I'm going to start kind of broad and work down, huge amount of change and a very aggressive project. And then COVID made it just that much harder to really pull this off. The vendor support for 2110 is frankly still evolving, right? As I said, base essence support, okay, but real world use is very challenging. Lots of testing is needed to make sure things are actually interoperating and working together. Um, Industry is focused on IP and not IT. And so this is truly an IT network for production, but we still manage it and design it and things like that as if it was an SDI world. And we have other tools that are similar to things that have been developed for the media world, in terms of how we deal with, sort of the NMOS 04, right? Is very similar in some ways to a DNS, but it had to be, it was created differently, and so it doesn't have the same sort of management capabilities that you would have in an IT network, and that's a big challenge for us. I'll go into more detail in the next point, in the next slide, but system management and configuration management is an absolutely tough thing. Okay, and it's something that the industry, I think, really needs to work on. We still are not managing it the way it's somewhat terrifying. But we have all of this equipment and all of this configuration is completely dynamic, and the configuration management that we are using is based upon 28 Excel spreadsheets, and they are huge spreadsheets, and so that allows you to get things statically working, and then how we can create paths, provide you the flexibility of use, but when you want to upgrade something, when you want to need to replace something, this becomes really, really challenging. And that's, of course, not the way an IT network will be managed, right? And it's not the way you would deploy upgrades and things like that, but it is unfortunately still the way that you do it for a broadcast or a media system. And that's something I think we really need to work on as an industry. And we've got an initiative underway to replace that with a new approach, but it's going to take us a while to get that in place. We've taken this cloud deployment for traditional kit. This is providing a lot of resiliency and flexibility, but really kind of messes with people's minds about the fact that they're operating a vision mixer and the back end of it is thousands of kilometers away, and could be switched to be some, and they really don't know which one it is, or nor should they have to. And so, this aspect of this abstraction layer has worked very effectively, but it is hard for people to understand. And then along with it, we've had a lot of industry consolidation, companies buying other companies and transforming and being challenged on revenues and so forth, makes it even more difficult. Diving a layer deeper, some tactical challenge. No vendor passed our 2110 tests on the first run. And that was really all around NMOS issues, naming issues, and metadata and aspects around that. We had more than one vendor who hard coded the name, the NMOS name. And when you're buying several hundred of something, for them all to be called the same is completely unmanageable or undoable in an IP system. So it's just interesting how different vendors have interpreted the metadata, the configuration, the use of NMOS has been really, really complicated, and so it's taken a lot more testing on equipment before we could make things work. And then diagnosis tools, really hard to figure out when there's a problem where the problem really is. Even NMOS doesn't really provide a useful error state, leading to complex issue resolution. And then it says configuration management, huge challenge. Right, we've got this very dynamic infrastructure, and yet the way we're used to thinking and the way we design things is drawing a picture, a drawing. You can follow the path through, and that's no longer possible with these 800 switches and the path being defined by what is the best path, right? And so this is a part we really need to work on as an industry. I think the challenge here is going to be that these tend to be fairly unique. Right, overall, in terms of, is the solution that we would need the same solution as somebody else? I'm not sure whether there's a management configuration system that could do it all yet. I think we're away from that. But we certainly can work on things that allow for more common practices for implementation, allowing it easier to manage the systems. You just had a talk about PTP. We certainly found that announcement rates vary, and that causes issues. Audio, an amazingly hard area. Support for -7, resiliency, and PTP limited. And of course, the need in several of our audio devices to also convert between PTP and ASIO is quite a lot of challenge for us. Funny thing about, certain vendors took different approaches to what happens if you've got a network card and you're getting multiple inputs on that network card. It'd be common in a vision mixer or an audio board to maybe put a source on several places. Some vendors have handled this perfectly. They've said, I know that if somebody tells me to subscribe to that again, I just won't do it. Some have said, oh no, you tell me to subscribe again, I'm going to try it again, and then they get an error on the network card. And so, it's just these kind of practical aspects for how these systems work that we're still discovering along the way. An amazing number of AOC cables. Every vendor has a preferred cable they want you to use. So you need to use either their cables or the cable of the switch provider. And then you get to and there's been just an amazing number of cable failures here. This is completely surprising to me, actually, why we really challenged that. And so it became one of the words I didn't like to hear was AOC cables. They were always late to deliver, and then we had lots of problems. If you compare it to the world we're all used to, switching times are really slow. Okay, when we first started doing, the switches, and of course, a lot of activity has to happen. You have to tell one device to create a multicast stream. You have to tell the networks to create a path, and then you have to tell the other device to subscribe. And then you say that the route is now made. So when you do something like, set up a monitor wall, a multi-tiled monitor wall. When we first started doing that, that took about 30 minutes for all the switching to do it. And now we've got that down to a couple minutes for really complex, and well under a minute for, and the seconds for everything else. But it took a long time for us to get those switching times down and to optimize that. And then this last little annoying thing, you'd think when there's, with the speed of light everywhere, that we would not have the timing issues, but they absolutely still exist. So some industry challenges. The PlugFests, I think, have been great in many ways, but they haven't solved real world issues. So they've shown that you can go from one place to another place. And that's why I think they've been really helpful on the essence layer, but they haven't solved aspects for how you really need it to work together in an operating facility. And so, I think you'll see a recommendation down here that I think, the industry ought to do post-implementation reviews. So these PlugFests were interesting to show people, hey, it really could be possible to do this, but how you do it and how you operate it and the operating patterns that you use, I think, are really where the rubber meets the road in terms of real world implementation. And that's where standard bodies ought to look at the implementations out there. There's starting to be a few of them. We're not the only one by far who have done it, and look at these and the challenges. Help the vendors understand how to interpret the standards and where they need to really need to pay attention to the requirements. The industry, it's great that the industry has switched very quickly to 2110 focus. I will say I think that creates a bit of a challenge for some, is that to build a small system, a relatively small system, I think the cost overhead is quite large right now. It is, to build in the SDN layers, the switches, the resiliency in the switches. So of course we have, two networks and are doing all -7. That whole management and testing layer, the deployment layer, really complicated system management and support. We have IP, really talented IP network people on our support staffs. They don't come cheap, right? So these things are actually, they make sense at the scale we're talking about here, but in small systems, I think it's going to be still pretty challenging. We also have a lot of equipment that's not they put an adaptation on it. So you got an IP device and it says, well, how many audios can I do? Well, you can do 4 stereos. It's an interesting number, isn't it? Right? That's the SDI. And so I think that the more equipment comes fully IP, the better. The more we can get vendors to talk about solutions versus their product, because that's where the challenge is, making it operate as a solution. And the more we get these operating patterns aligned, as you heard me say several times, I think is really, really important. but we are seeing some really good stuff. So this just came out. Some of our guys worked on this, and you know, I was kind of amazed. I will say it's more technical than I can understand, but what I paid attention to was there's quite a list of problems there, right? You know, but what's really cool is there's a big list of solutions, right? So they've looked at these issues and said there actually are ways to do this. So this is the kind of stuff that's really helpful to people to say there actually is a solution. People have gone through the pain of figuring it out, and they're now sharing that information. I think it's really super important. So my last slide, you know, my hope is, and the reason I really wanted to do this session is to share some of the real world challenges, not to pick on things, not to say they're bad, because we built something that is just immense and allows us to evolve our business, which is incredible. Okay. But we all need to embrace and support and evolve the standards. You know, things like JTN M1001 is terrific. It's a beautiful picture. Okay. You can't build it today. So, you know, we need to help people understand how to make these operating patterns, improve testing and deployment and management time, you know, really create best practices for system management. These exist in the IT space. We actually don't have to rebuild them all from scratch. Okay. We need to take more advantage of what's being done in the IT space. How do you manage the IT network? How do you know where the problems are? How do you do upgrades of systems? You know, how do you upgrade components of systems? We have systems in our infrastructure that if they're powered off and powered back on, they change all their GUIDs. Changing a GUID inside of a network where you have to go back to a spreadsheet and update that information is not something, it's really hard to manage, right? And so, you know, but that problem has been solved in the IT world. So we need to really leverage those things. And then encourage people to make more use of cloud-based technology, IT-based technology, improve the system management. I mean, you know, and really define these best practices. So I'm going to leave there. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I hope this was useful.
Gordon, that was absolutely fascinating. I think you've already started the post-installation review process by giving this presentation, and maybe there's a way to you know, dig deeper into what you guys have done and what you have learned, and you know, spread that throughout more of the industry. I think that'd be really interesting. So there's one question here, and I think there's a few more rolling in right now. So first one says, how do you plan for and manage software and firmware upgrades? Do you toggle between primary, secondary, and tertiary systems? Are there meetings held to discuss what gets patched first?
So patching is a huge problem for everybody, of course.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think we have right now 1,300 machines that need to be patched. They sit here today, and it's constant, you know, activity. So we have full-time people they're just, you know, taking the InfoSec requirements, and unfortunately, we still have to, you know, some of the things we can actually just roll out. So all of the things, for example, on our VM installations, which are all the editing, all the user interfaces, you know, so that all the PCs that would have normally been spread around the facility are all on VMs. Okay. Mm-hmm. And those are great because, you know, we can just you know, upgrade the image, and just as people log off, we update it, right? So, you know, that kind of stuff is great. Where the 1,300 comes in is the fact that we still have a lot of machines that are physical, okay, and some machines which don't log themselves off very often. So our playout systems, for example, right, do have a dynamic association, so they spin up other instances automatically. It only takes you know, and does in 160 milliseconds, it can stand up another playout chain, okay? But either you have to tell the system to fail or wait for it to fail before it will get the update, right? So we still have, you know, so you got to go through testing, of course, because some of the ones, you know, the vendors say, well, I'm not sure it's validated to this version and things like that. So you go through testing, and then some of them really have to actually go through a physically coordinated shutdown reboot. Okay. And that's the tough part. The good news is we can now manage everything from a laptop. Okay, so the entire infrastructure, because the data center, so one of our data centers is in our facility and one is not, and we just have smart hands at that data center. It's not even any of our employees there. Okay, and we can manage that whole facility all remotely. So doing it is much easier than it was in the past, but you still have some manual coordination around some of the devices.
So I also heard you mention earlier that you have some pretty big Excel worksheets.
Yeah.
But what do you see as the solution to that? What do you know? How do we get away from Excel? Is there technology in the pipeline that you're looking at?
Yeah, so we stole with pride the idea of the CBC. Okay, and so we are moving that to an Ansible-based system. And so Ansible is a tool in the IT space. It's used to doing configuration management and a system management, and that allows us to have a very systematic approach to, so instead of having a spreadsheet, we'll now have an actual database that's just keeping track of all this stuff, and it can handle these aspects of updates as well as system changes. Because even if you change a card, so you go to a vision mixer and you pull out a card and you put in another card, that card has a different GUID number. Right, and so you need a way to then upgrade it. So taking IT-based tools that are used to this, when you plug it, you plug the network card in your laptop and you go in and the system says, oh, look, I got a new one, but I can figure out what to do with it. And I can automatically give it the parameters, the security parameters and other things. I can say, you need this. If you want to play on a network, we'll tell you how to set up, and today that's all, a lot of it's manually done. So we're going to employ IT tools to do it. And so we're in the process of transitioning the spreadsheets into Ansible.
That sounds like quite a process.
Yeah. I wish we would have done it before we started, but
yeah. So what's next? So you got the Olympics to stay going. What's on your roadmap?
Well, we're still not done with the overall project, to be honest. So the production parts of it, all the control rooms, most of them are deployed. MAM deployed and things like that. We still have to transition our legacy linear off and things like that. So we have some of the SDI stuff still running for some of our actual final play out. So getting off of that, so we're not running two different environments, is really the big deal for us right now.
And do you have a time frame for that?
The whole rollout, the rest of the rollout will actually take till the end of next year.
Okay.
And that's mainly due to the fact of just, we've got, over, you've got over a couple hundred channels by the time you add all the digital stuff we do as well in there. So it's just the transitions. Actually, the digital channels are already transitioned. So they're all running on completely on the new infrastructure. It's the linear that we need to now transition.